Hello everyone, Trophy Wine Hunter. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and another one of my Bordeaux basic videos. Today I'd like to introduce you to my friends from Bordeaux. These are the wines of the 1855 classification system. Hello wine lovers, Trophy Wine Hunter. Welcome back to my wine channel and another one of my videos on Bordeaux wine basics. So today we're going to talk about the 1855 classification system. This is, if you want to know about Bordeaux, everyone talks about it. And so I think let's describe it and its importance, okay? So let's describe it first, what it is. So the 1855 classification system was created or commissioned by Napoleon III for the 1855 fair in Paris. So they had this fair or expo, which we have, in our modern age. And so Napoleon wanted to emphasize French wine, and so he wanted to have all these wines presented at the fair. But there's so many wines and wineries in France, so he said, well, we can't let them all present, so we have to have some classification system and only allow the top wines to present. He wanted to cut down the number of wineries so that people that visited the fair could kind of focus on those wineries. So he commissioned a ranking system, and he asked the Gironde Chamber of Commerce to do it. And they kind of said, well, we don't really want the responsibility. We might offend some people, so we're going to pass it off. We're going to pass off this responsibility to called the Syndicate of Courtiers, which is an association of brokers, negociants. And so they actually put together a list of, in those days, it's 58 wineries that were ranked from first growth to fifth growth. And the interesting thing that people think that it was ranked on quality. It wasn't. The basis of the ranking was based on reputation and the price of the wines, which in those days translated to quality. But it was never meant to be a measure of quality. It was meant to be a measure of ranking in terms of the price per bottle and also the reputation. And this is why the 1855 classification system is very important today, because it's still used and followed by the auctions, right? So investors, auctions houses still follow the 1855 classification system. And this is why consumers kind of feel like this 1855 classification system is out of date, because it was never meant to be a judge of quality. It was meant for pricing wines at auction or for brokers. So I just want to step back a minute and just think about this, right? It's so incredible. There was this expo and these people presented wines. I don't think they actually thought it was that big a deal. They just thought, oh, Napoleon wants to do this. Okay, someone do this, right? They never thought this classification system would be this important 150 years later. If they had thought that, they would have taken it seriously. They would have fought to be like, I want to be a judge, right? But they all didn't want to do it. It's like, oh, this is such a hassle, right? We've got an expo, we got other things to do, and Napoleon wants us to do this ranking system, whatever, right? It's kind of funny how history works, right? And the same thing with the wineries. I think the wineries, had they known that this ranking system would be so important 150 years later, I'm sure they would put a lot more effort into this. But it was just like a ranking, okay, whatever. And so you have to go back to those days in 1855. It was a popular thing to kind of just rank wines. Jefferson did it. So Jefferson actually did a ranking of the top wines. He said Lafite, Latour, Margaux, Haut-Brion were his favorites in the ranking. It was kind of like what we do today. Like, we like to talk about sports and whatever. That's what they did. They like to rank wines. And so the ranking actually only took 2 weeks. But you have to understand that previous to that, there were many lists out there already. So for back almost 70 years, there were always lists. There was various lists. And most of these wines had made those lists. The other thing that they considered in the ranking system is the price per barrel for the last 40 years between 1815 and 1855. So that's really the context. So a couple of more interesting random facts about this 1855 classification system. First of all the wines came from the Medoc region. There was one exception, which is Oppion from the Grave region. That was the center of trade. So when you ask, well, why were wines on the right bank, such as the Petrus, La Pin, not ranked? Well, at that point, they were just simple wines, and some of those wineries didn't exist in 1855. So that's part of the reason. And that was really the center of trade. Medoc was the center of trade with Belgium and also with the UK. There was only at that, right now, currently, there are 61 or 62 growth wines, okay? In those days, there was actually 58, but some of them have split up, and there's only been 3 changes in total, or so 2 changes in history of the ranking system, and then 1 winery merged. So technically, there's only 61 growth wines that you can drink today. The other thing is that they were all red wines, and they also did a classification system for Sauternes. And we'll go through that in a later video. Why did they not rank white wines? Because at that point, no one drank white wines in 1855. Everyone drank sweet wines. And Sauternes were actually very popular wines as appetizer or meal, first course meal wines. No one drank white wines. So it's just, so interesting, the historical context of these things. Let's talk about the significance of the 1855 classification system. As I said, it's still significant because it's used by auction buyers, by collectors, those people who trade in wines. That was the original intent of this. It's based on reputation and the price per bottle, and so and what stemmed from that is the quality. But that's not necessarily the case. So to give you an analogy that maybe is easier to understand, it's kind of like the English Premier Soccer League, right? Is it the best league in the world? It's one of the best, but it's arguable, right? There's other great leagues in the world, right? And, it's just something you have to accept. Like, so for instance, with soccer, why are there like 12 players? Why do you have only 1 goalie? Why is it offside? There's no real reason. It's just, that's how they play the game. That's the rules of the game. Same thing with the 1855 classification. Well, why did they rank these wines? Why did they rank them in 5 gross? Why did they, choose only 5th? No real reason. It's just, those are the rules. And so it's just set. And it's just something that's kind of manageable. And so the next question is, well, if it's so arbitrary, why do they still use it? The answer is that it's got some historical significance and there's no reason to change it. So if you look at the historical context of why this classification system was created, it was for Napoleon to basically promote French wines and say, listen, I want to promote French wines, but I want to create some type of status or system that's easily understandable. Because if I have this expo and I let everyone in France bring their wines and there's 2,000 wineries, then no one knows what's a good wine and no one knows how to figure this out. So I'm going to create this class system so it's really easy. Oh, these 61 wines or 58 wines at that point are the best wines. It's easy for people to understand. And this has followed all these years because it's kind of order and people like order. It will never change. This system will, like it or not, whether you agree with it or not, it will never change because those wineries that are growth wines, they are some of the biggest and richest wineries in Bordeaux. They will never give up the system. This is the whole system. It's like our monetary banking system. There's too many players involved to that would be affected. It would affect all the wine experts. It would affect all the negociants. It would turn everything upside down. So it's in no one's interest that this changes. Of course, it's for the interest of those Cru Bourgeois or those wineries that didn't get ranked. But collectively, they don't have the significance or they have the ability to turn this around. No wine critic, not Robert Parker, not Wine Spectator, no one has that power to turn it around, nor is it in their collective interest. Because if, in fact, you get rid of the system, you have some new system, and it's very difficult for anyone to follow. And how do these wine experts or wine critics deal with a kind of not structured or organized system? So this is why it keeps in place. So what did all these wineries get? So every winery, and I'm picking up Belgrave here, if you see on the bottle, every growth wine can put down on their bottle Grand Cru Classe 1855. So they have that right and no one else has that right. And that identifies them as a growth wine. And so I know that some people say, well, the system doesn't work. And so I have a couple of things to say about that. One, we have to look at historical context. And this is one thing that we have to remember, right? Trends and wineries go up and down in the course of things. But by and large, if you look at the 150 years of history of these wineries, by and large, the system works pretty well. And the reason I say that is there have been some wineries who've had some difficulties in some years, but they had great years in the past, right? So going back into the Premier Soccer League, right? There's some teams, Liverpool, Manchester United, Arsenal. Each year, from year to year, they may not be at the top of the league, but they're always kind of top football clubs, and they have huge followings and they have huge history. Again, this is kind of something that we have to remember. Like a team like Manchester City, right? In the last 10 years, they have had a ton of money because they have a ton of ownership. But go back 30 years or 40 years, they weren't a top club. That's what I'm saying with the Bordeaux growth systems, right? There's lots of wineries, and we're going to go through each one very carefully that have different histories. So by and large, the system works. And because it works and because people follow it, in general, the growth wines are going to be the wines that have the most sales, have the best prices, have the most money. And this becomes a vicious cycle because when they have the most notoriety, they will be able to sell their wines easier. If they're able to sell their wines easier, they will get more money. If they have more money, they have more money to put back into the winery, and therefore they can make better wines. Is that 100% true? No. Of course there's great wines, but by and large, that is still, you're going to get a very good wine, good quality wine when you buy a Grand Cru ranked wine. And that is why I'm saying when you are starting out in Bordeaux and you want to drink higher end wines, a good bet, if you can find an affordable Grand Cru or growth wine, is that it will be a pretty decent wine. Okay, so that's all I'm saying. So in my future videos, I'm going to go through each of the classes of growths and each wine in each of the growths. I've been fortunate enough to drink most of the growths. I think I've maybe missed out 5, and I've been fortunate to drink many of them on multiple occasions. I've been fortunate enough to drink vintages that are pre-World War II. So I will go through my experiences with each of those wines and try to give you a historical context of each wine. But in terms of, there's 5 growth levels, right? The first growth, there's 5 first growths. The second growth, there's 14 second growths. Third, there's 15 third growths. There's 10 fourth growths, and there's 18 fifth growths. So does this mean anything to ranking? I'm going to make some general comments about the growth system. By and large, when you're talking about a first and second growth, you're going to get good quality wines, right? Though by and large, those are still some of the top wines in terms of quality, reputation, and price at auction. Once you get lower down, as you get to the third, fourth, and fifth growth, there's more variability. That means that wine could be very good, or it could be not as good. And so that's kind of how I feel about the wines. In addition, I think that there's more variability within the region of Margaux. Okay, so Margaux as a region has a lot of growth wines, more than Saint Estèphe, more than very similar to Saint Julien. Proportionately, they have more than they should if you look at the modern age. That's because in 1855, Margaux was a very important region and very hot in terms of consumer and demand and notoriety. So those had a lot of high rankings. A lot of second growths and third growths are in the Margaux region. Those historically have not done as well because of ownership changes, right? But what I will say is a lot of them are coming back with the modern age. A lot of these are coming back. So you might get some, although they may not perform at their level at this point, they're starting to, and you might be able to catch some value there. Likewise, Pauillac is probably underrepresented. So there's a lot of Pauillac wines in the fifth growth region or level. Again, at that point, it was just a thing. It wasn't as notable. So, I think a lot of those fifth growth wines actually today perform a lot better. And that is steered a lot by, what's happened in Pauillac and the money in Pauillac. It's interesting because a lot of these wineries had changes in ownership and had troubles. A lot of in between the 1920s and the 1970s, and so you can understand why there was two world wars, one in the late 1900s, 1910, 1920, one in 1939 to 45. So those kind of ravaged a lot of vineyards, and what we see today, this never happened. Wines in the 60s and 70s, they were well liked, but they weren't escalating in price like this. This is crazy, right? So if you told people, brokers in the 1900s that Chateau Lafite would be selling for $2,000 a bottle, they'd be like, "Are you kidding me?" They probably sold for $30 a bottle at that point. And so this astronomical growth in pricing has only really occurred in the modern age, which is probably less than the last 20 years. Previous to that, a lot of wineries had trouble selling their wines for a good value, and you said a lot of ownership changes. Now, with globalization, with the knowledge of these wines, I think you will almost not ever see a growth wine come up for sale anymore because they're too big, it's too valuable, and they get too much money. So this idea that, these wineries won't produce good wines, impossible at this point, because if they underproduce, if someone would just buy it, because there's so much value in a growth wine. There's only 61 of them, right? It's like a taxi license. If the whole France only had 61 taxi licenses, they're going to be valuable. It doesn't matter how bad the taxi is, right? It doesn't matter how bad the owner is, because if they're that bad and they lose money, someone else will just buy it up really quickly. That's kind of the value of the growth system. So in summary, it's important to understand the growth system because it affects pricing, it affects reputation. It's what people talk about in the industry. Is it a absolute ranking of quality? No. It's a got a pretty good correlation, especially at the higher levels. But it's just knowledge. It's just like something that you know. And going back to like soccer, right? You know, you can still enjoy soccer if you don't know all the players and all the teams, but it makes it more fun if you know the good teams, you know where they are in the league, you know the players, you know the intricacies of their plays. That's all it is. And it's a memorization tool, right? So you know, you when you have a familiarity, you know, like for instance, Belgrave, fifth growth, Langua Burton, and I don't even know this. I'm thinking off the top of my head. I hope it's a third growth or fourth. I can't remember. I'll have it in the section. But this is the type of thing, right? If I can, oh yeah, it seems like you're more knowledgeable because I'm shouting out fifth growth or third growth. Does it make me a better taster? Not really, but it's kind of fun, right? It's a fun thing to learn about history. And when I go through each of these wines, wine by wine, you'll see each of them has very, very interesting stories and interesting history. That to me is the exciting part of Bordeaux and growth wines, that each one of them has a tale, a story, and it's always intriguing. It's always fraught of, you know, good, interesting characters or changes or twists in fate, all types of things. Until next time, happy drinking.